Welcome, esteemed gentlemen. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. This old proverb rings especially true for Sigmas, those enigmatic individuals who defy convention and operate outside the bounds of traditional hierarchies. Loved by few, misunderstood by many, and quietly envied by most, Sigmas are a paradox. Self-reliant, yet influential, invisible, yet impossible to ignore. Here's an intriguing fact. Studies show that people who deviate from societal norms are often perceived as threats, even if they pose no actual danger. Now imagine being a Sigma, someone who not only deviates from norms, but rewrites them entirely. It's no wonder they're often targeted, whether by jealousy, misunderstanding, or sheer discomfort at their unshakable presence. Why does this happen? Is it because they threaten the status quo, or simply because they make everyone else's drama look like a bad sitcom? Let's dive into the fascinating and occasionally amusing reasons why Sigmas seem to have a bullseye on their back. You'll quickly realize being a Sigma isn't just a mindset, it's a magnet for attention, whether they want it or not. Number 1. They don't fight back in expected ways. Sigmas have a way of responding to conflict that confuses and frustrates their aggressors. Unlike most people who react emotionally or impulsively, Sigmas rarely play into the drama. They don't argue for the sake of being right, nor do they seek validation through confrontation. Instead, they approach conflict with an almost unnerving calmness, as if they've already analyzed every possible outcome before anyone else has even started. This ability to stay composed, even under fire, leaves their opponents feeling unarmed and uncertain about how to proceed. What's even more intriguing is that Sigmas don't retaliate in ways people expect. They won't shout, plead, or engage in petty tit-for-tat games. Instead, they take a step back, assess the situation, and either dismantle the conflict with quiet logic or walk away altogether. This unpredictability disarms their attackers, who often rely on eliciting emotional reactions to fuel their own sense of control. It's like throwing punches at a shadow. There's no satisfying target and every move feels futile. But this approach doesn't mean Sigmas are passive or submissive. Far from it. When they choose to respond, their actions are calculated and precise, often delivering a blow so subtle that it's felt long after the moment has passed. This level of strategic thinking can make them appear untouchable, which only heightens the frustration of those trying to provoke them. Ultimately, the Sigma's refusal to fight on someone else's terms exposes the pettiness of the conflict itself. They don't just win, they make the entire game irrelevant. This is what sets them apart and makes them a target. People don't like losing control, and nothing feels more like a loss than realizing the person you tried to provoke never even stepped into the ring. Number 2. They expose the fragility of the alpha myth. Sigmas disrupt the traditional narrative of power by proving that dominance and submission are not the only ways to succeed. While society often glorifies the alpha, the loud, assertive leader who thrives on control, Sigmas quietly carve their own path, relying on self-reliance, adaptability, and authenticity. This undermines the very foundation of alpha-centric hierarchies, where power is measured by one's ability to dominate or be dominated. Sigmas thrive in spaces where traditional leaders often falter, succeeding through strategy, introspection, and independence rather than by commanding others. They don't need a pack to validate their worth, nor do they require followers to feel influential. This challenges the assumption that leadership is inherently tied to visibility or control, leaving those who cling to the alpha archetype feeling exposed and insecure. The Sigma's success also reveals the flaws in the alpha myth. It exposes how much traditional hierarchies depend on external validation and group dynamics to sustain themselves. Alphas rely on recognition from others to cement their authority. But Sigmas show that true power doesn't need an audience. This quiet defiance often causes discomfort among those who have built their identity around the alpha model, forcing them to confront the fragility of their constructed roles. Perhaps the most unsettling part for those invested in alpha-centric structures is that Sigmas succeed without playing by the rules. They don't need to dominate, follow, or even participate in the social games that others consider essential. This silent rejection of the system feels like a direct challenge to its legitimacy, making sigmas a living contradiction to the alpha ideal, and a reminder that power, influence, and success don't have to come from the top of the hierarchy. Number 3, their elusiveness breeds curiosity and envy. Sigmas have a way of existing that feels almost untouchable, and it's this elusiveness that captivates and unsettles others in equal measure. They aren't the loudest in the room, nor do they strive to be. Instead, they move quietly, observing, thinking, and acting only when necessary. This low-profile approach makes them enigmatic, a puzzle that people can't quite solve. The less they reveal, the more others want to know, and this curiosity can quickly turn into envy for those who thrive on visibility and external validation. For people who constantly seek attention, the Sigma's ability to remain self-sufficient and unnoticed is baffling. To them, success and influence come from being seen, acknowledged, and admired. But Sigmas thrive in the shadows, proving that they don't need the spotlight to be effective. This silent confidence can feel like an unspoken challenge to those who equate worth with attention, leaving them wondering, how do they manage to matter so much without even trying? The envy grows deeper when others realize that the Sigma's mystery isn't an act. It's a natural extension of who they are. Sigmas don't hide. They simply don't feel the need to explain themselves or share their every move. This lack of transparency frustrates people who rely on understanding others to gain a sense of control. Not knowing what the Sigma is thinking or planning creates a sense of unease, as if they're operating on a level others can't access. Ironically, the very traits that make Sigmas elusive, privacy, independence, and restraint, are the same qualities that make them irresistible to those who want to crack their code. But the harder people try to decipher them, the more Sigmas slip through their fingers, leaving behind an intriguing mix of fascination and frustration. Number 4, they make conventional leadership feel obsolete. Sigmas turn the concept of traditional leadership on its head simply by existing. Conventional leaders, especially those rooted in alpha-dominated systems, thrive on followers. Their power is measured by the size of their influence, the number of people they command, and their ability to control group dynamics. Sigmas, on the other hand, lead themselves, proving that influence and authority don't require followers or hierarchical structures. This self-leadership exposes a fundamental flaw in traditional leadership models: dependency. Alphas and conventional leaders are only as strong as the loyalty of their followers. Remove the group, and their power diminishes. Sigmas, however, operate independently of these dynamics. They don't need external validation or a group to validate their worth. They carve their own path, driven by their values, vision, and goals. This level of autonomy challenges the relevance of leadership models that rely on the collective. Sigmas also bypass the performative aspects of leadership that many traditional leaders depend on. They don't need to grandstand, inspire applause, or assert dominance to make an impact. Instead, they lead by example, often in subtle ways that go unnoticed until the results speak for themselves. This quiet competence can make traditional leaders feel outdated, as it shifts the focus from charisma and control to results and authenticity. What's most unsettling for conventional leaders is that Sigmas make their roles feel unnecessary. By succeeding without the framework of traditional hierarchies, Sigmas show that leadership doesn't have to come from the top of a pyramid. It can come from within, making the entire concept of leading others seem redundant. This realization forces people to question the validity of systems they've relied on for centuries, creating discomfort and resistance toward the Sigma way of life. Number 5, they are silent competitors. Sigmas are the kind of competitors who catch others off guard because they play by an entirely different set of rules. While many people thrive on public displays of ambition, declaring goals, celebrating milestones, and seeking applause for their efforts, Sigmas prefer to move in silence. They don't advertise their plans, and they certainly don't seek validation for their progress. This low-key approach makes their success feel sudden and, to some, unsettling. What makes Sigmas particularly threatening is their ability to quietly outperform others without drawing attention to themselves. While others are busy showcasing their every move, sigmas are focused on the end game. They're not concerned with who's watching, they're only interested in results. And when those results come, they often overshadow the more visible efforts of their peers, leaving others questioning how it happened so seamlessly. This unpredictability is what makes sigmas a unique kind of threat. Traditional competitors are easy to read. They telegraph their moves, giving others time to prepare. Sigmas, however, keep their cards close to their chest. By the time anyone realizes they're in the game, the sigma is already steps ahead, leaving rivals scrambling to catch up. The silent nature of their competition also highlights the performative aspects of those who rely on public validation. Sigmas don't need an audience to feel accomplished, which can be deeply frustrating for individuals who measure their worth by external applause. Their quiet confidence acts as a mirror, exposing the insecurity of those who can't operate without constant recognition. Ultimately, sigmas don't just compete, they redefine what competition looks like. They remind others that true success doesn't need a spotlight, and that's precisely what makes them so difficult to challenge and impossible to ignore. Number 6. They are perceived as unpredictable mavericks. Sigmas are often seen as unpredictable mavericks because they refuse to fit neatly into the traditional boxes that society expects. They don't follow established rules, conventional timelines, or societal norms, and they don't feel the need to explain why. This creates a sense of unease in others, especially in environments where predictability is prized. People like to know what to expect from those around them. It gives them a sense of control. Sigmas, however, disrupt this dynamic simply by being themselves. Their unpredictability isn't rooted in chaos or recklessness. It's a product of their independence and adaptability. Sigmas operate based on logic, intuition, and personal values rather than external expectations. This makes their decisions hard to anticipate. One day they might quietly observe from the sidelines, and the next they could take bold action that shifts the entire dynamic of a group or situation. This level of spontaneity challenges the comfort zones of people who depend on routine and hierarchy to maintain control. What makes sigmas particularly challenging is that they don't seek approval or validation for their actions. They're not interested in playing by the rules of traditional power structures, which frustrates those who are accustomed to predictable behavior within these systems. Their independence is viewed as defiance, even when it isn't intended to be, because it reminds others that control over them is unattainable. This fear and suspicion often lead to targeting. People project their insecurities onto sigmas, labeling them as wild cards or lone wolves simply because they can't predict or manipulate them. But in reality, the sigma's so-called unpredictability is their strength, a sign of their freedom to think and act independently, regardless of how it makes others feel, and that freedom, to those who crave control, is a direct threat. Number 7. They are misunderstood as arrogant or aloof. Sigmas prioritize solitude and self-reflection, traits that can be easily misunderstood by those who equate constant social interaction with warmth or connection. Their tendency to withdraw isn't an act of rejection or superiority. It's a natural way for them to recharge, process their thoughts, and maintain their independence. However, in a world that often values extroversion and group dynamics, this behavior is frequently misinterpreted. People may label sigmas as arrogant, aloof, or even dismissive, simply because they don't adhere to the expected norms of social engagement. This misunderstanding often stems from projection. When someone is used to seeking validation or affirmation through others, encountering someone who doesn't feel that need can feel unsettling. Sigmas don't seek approval, nor do they go out of their way to explain their actions or choices. To an outside observer, this quiet self-assuredness can come across as a sense of superiority, even though it's not rooted in arrogance. Additionally, sigmas are highly selective about where they invest their energy. They prefer meaningful interactions over superficial ones, which can unintentionally leave some people feeling excluded or undervalued. This isn't because sigmas look down on others, it's because they value their time and authenticity too much to engage in empty exchanges. However, to those who don't understand this, it might seem like the sigma is intentionally keeping their distance. The animosity that arises from these misinterpretations is rarely rooted in truth. Rather, it's a reflection of how society often struggles to understand those who deviate from its norms. Sigmas don't withdraw out of contempt or arrogance. They do so to preserve their individuality and peace. Unfortunately, this quiet independence often triggers insecurity in others, leading to judgment and resentment that the sigma never intended to provoke. Number 8. They blur the lines between introversion and leadership. Sigmas exist in a space that challenges traditional definitions of roles like leader or follower. They don't conform to the loud, dominant image of leadership, nor do they exhibit the submissive tendencies often associated with following. Instead, they operate on their own terms, blending the introspection of an introvert with the quiet authority of a leader. This duality makes them difficult to categorize, creating discomfort for those who rely on clear social labels to navigate interactions. Unlike traditional leaders who command attention and followers who seek guidance, sigmas lead themselves. They're self-directed and confident in their decisions, which naturally inspires others, not because they seek to lead, but because their independence is magnetic. This creates an unintentional ripple effect. People may start following a sigma's example without realizing it, which can confuse or frustrate traditional leaders who rely on overt control. At the same time, sigmas' introspective nature means they often choose solitude over the spotlight. They don't fit the mold of a charismatic leader who rallies crowds or seeks validation. Yet their quiet strength and ability to think deeply set them apart, giving them an edge in decision-making and problem-solving. This contrast, a leader who doesn't crave attention, can be unsettling to those who equate leadership with extroversion and visibility. This ambiguity can lead to misplaced hostility. When people can't neatly categorize someone, they often project their own confusion onto them. Sigmas may be perceived as indecisive or evasive when, in reality, they are simply operating outside the narrow confines of societal expectations. Their ability to blur these lines forces others to confront their own biases about what leadership and influence should look like, making sigmas targets of misunderstanding and sometimes resentment. Number 9. Their presence amplifies insecurities. Sigmas have a unique way of existing in the world that tends to bring out the insecurities in those around them. They walk through life with a quiet self-assurance that doesn't need validation, and they don't feel the need to conform to societal expectations or social norms. This grounded confidence, which is rare in a world obsessed with approval and external recognition, unintentionally exposes the vulnerabilities of others who rely on external validation to feel secure in themselves. For individuals who are constantly seeking reassurance or trying to measure up to the standards set by others, the sigma's unwavering sense of self is a stark reminder that they don't need anyone else's approval to thrive. This realization can be uncomfortable for those who aren't as secure in their own identity. Where a conventional leader might boost the confidence of others by including them or seeking their approval, a sigma does the opposite. Their mere presence forces people to confront their own doubts and self-imposed limitations. In environments where comparison is the norm, the sigma stands apart, effortlessly showing that success and contentment don't require fitting into the mold. This creates a dissonance for those who have always relied on following the crowd to feel validated. It's easier to criticize someone who doesn't need validation than to examine why their own sense of self feels fragile in comparison. As a result, the sigma's independence and quiet confidence can lead to defensive targeting. People who feel insecure may direct their frustrations at the sigma, misinterpreting their self-assurance as arrogance or aloofness. The reality is that the sigma's presence doesn't pose a threat. It merely highlights the insecurities of others, forcing them to either confront their own lack of self-assurance or project their discomfort onto the one person who seems immune to the need for external validation. Number 10. They are natural deterrents to manipulators. Sigmas are like a living defense mechanism against manipulators. Their detachment and keen observation skills allow them to see through tactics that others might miss, making them difficult, if not impossible, to deceive. They don't fall for flattery or emotional manipulation, and they aren't easily swayed by pressure or subtle coercion. This ability to remain unaffected by manipulative behavior often puts them at odds with people who thrive on controlling others through deception. Manipulators rely on people's emotional vulnerabilities to get what they want, whether it's guilt, fear, or a carefully crafted appeal to sympathy. But Sigmas don't easily fall into these traps. Their tendency to observe rather than react gives them a higher level of emotional detachment, allowing them to make decisions based on logic and facts rather than on emotional appeals. They can see through a manipulative person's tactics before the plot even begins to unfold, making them a natural deterrent to anyone trying to exploit them. This makes Sigmas frustrating to deal with for manipulators who are used to relying on power plays and emotional leverage to control others. The Sigma doesn't give them that foothold. They don't fall into the predictable patterns of behavior that manipulators are accustomed to, and their resistance to being controlled creates a sense of helplessness in those who rely on deception to succeed. As a result, Sigmas often become targets of resentment from manipulators who feel thwarted by their inability to exploit them. Instead of manipulating to get ahead, Sigmas rely on their independence, critical thinking, and the simple power of being unaffected by others' attempts to influence them. This refusal to play the game of manipulation not only sets them apart, but also positions them as a direct threat to anyone who depends on the art of deceit for control. In a world that thrives on conformity, attention, and manipulation, Sigmas stand as a quiet rebellion against the norms. They don't follow the well-worn paths laid out for them by society. They carve their own, guided by independence, self-reliance, and an unwavering sense of authenticity. Their very existence challenges the systems that demand submission, dominance, and visibility, and it's this defiance that makes them both fascinating and, at times, unsettling to those around them. Sigmas don't seek validation, don't need approval, and refuse to be manipulated. Their unpredictability, silence, and self-assurance leave others in a constant state of curiosity, fear, or even resentment. But rather than being mere rebels without cause, Sigmas embody a kind of power that comes not from dominating others, but from being wholly self-sufficient. They show that leadership doesn't have to be loud, that confidence doesn't require applause, and that true strength often exists in the quietest of forms. In the end, Sigmas are far from the misfits or loners they are often painted as. They are the rare few who understand that to truly thrive, one must not only reject the limitations of traditional power structures, but also embrace a deeper understanding of self. They may not be for everyone, and they certainly don't need to be. But in a world full of noise, their presence is a reminder that greatness doesn't always have to be shouted from the rooftops. It often whispers from the shadows, quietly redefining the very rules of the game. If you've found yourself captivated by the world of Sigmas and their unique way of thriving, don't miss out on more intriguing insights and thought-provoking content. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update on topics that challenge the norms and spark real conversations. Like this video if you found it eye-opening, and don't forget to comment your thoughts below. Let's keep the conversation going. And of course, if you think this could resonate with someone else, share it with your friends, family, or anyone who might need a reminder that there's power in being unapologetically yourself. The more we explore, the more we grow. So let's keep pushing boundaries together.